Hey all, welcome to Circle of Sickness, and today we have the mighty Carcass. This may be a 3-part series because I want to do 3 different eras. The first era that we're going to go for is the big one, Heartwork. Now I know there's like a little percentage of people pounced over their keyboards. Special cabinets, mixed in with practice amps, blah, blah, blah. Like, they can't wait. They can't wait to comment. What I'm going to tell you is that this is Circle of Tone, bitch. And we don't mess around. And you may be wrong about what they used on this album. Or not so much what they used, but why it's so good. So, with that, let's get straight to the music. If you like these types of videos, subscribe. Believe it or not, channels that deal with grindcore and old school thrash and old metal and the rest of it isn't very popular. So please share. Share, like, all that shit. Alright. Circle of Tone, Carcass. And we're back. So, kind of messed that one up. I didn't play it right. After closer listening, I was playing it open, and they were muting a lot of the strings. So this isn't really a cover channel, so take it easy on me. So let's talk about the gear that they used. Okay, it's pretty much, if you're really into Carcass and you are into the tone, because that tone was legendary for the time. It was so influential. The consensus was there was some information by the engineer online. Just pause, and this is the gear that was used during the capture process. That looked a bit, if you did pause and read that, that looked a bit weird. But I'm going to tell you now that it's not as easy as that. Just because the engineer says that this was used doesn't mean that it made it to the final mix. Because a little bird told me that practically all of it is 5150. And he got that from a good source. But I don't want to throw too much water over your blanket, because that's not even my point either when it says that you may be wrong. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of what was used in the studio and the techniques that they made, because it was all part of my reasoning about what makes this album so amazing, okay? And groundbreaking for the time. That was, in my opinion, it started the whole melodeath craze. Ammott went on to really impact melodeath as well. And progressive techno melodeath, not prog, but so-called. It's fast, right? So it must be progressive. Don't go there, Owen. All right. So I'm not saying that this album ruined heavy metal, because it was so good. I did. But, because I love this album. Everyone loves this album. But, goddamn, the copycats afterwards. All right, stop. Okay, so what about my intro was... Did I come to the conclusion that you really don't know why this album sounds so good? Forum guys, no, not the general public. If you listen to all of my rants on what's wrong with metal these days, here's a quick condensed clip of my reasonings. So what did The Who have? What did the Queen have? They had a gig every night. Before they were signed, before they made it, they were playing every single night. The Beatles, before they were signed in Germany, played 2 or 3 gigs a night as 17 to 19-year-old kids. That's called cutting your teeth. That's called paying your dues. That is missing now with the bedroom-based recordings that we're hearing in rock and metal. A lot of it is fake amps, fake speakers, fake drums, fake everything. Everything's on rails, everything's perfect, everything's quantized, everything's snapped to a grid. So the live scene is dead. They used to have, before disco, they used to have these classic bands cut their teeth playing live constantly every night. And that is where you learn what's musical. You know, you're literally playing music with other people, creating something that is better than just what I could do as a bedroom, as a bedroom producer. Kids can't afford to even get a rental space, let alone buy a truck to lug their drums around, their drums around, let alone drive for 3 hours for gas money. It's too expensive to actually do it like the old days. And what you may not know is Carcass actually had this whole album demoed before they went into the studio, into Parr Street Studios, which is Coldplay. It's a big studio. And funnily enough, they, even though on paper it looks good, they did rent out the cheapest room, the cheapest aspect of it. But, it was £100 a day, which was a big deal back then to a grindcore band. What people don't know is on the previous album that they were touring, this was against the singer. He didn't want to do this, but they actually played the entire Heartwork album on that tour. For a previous album, nobody heard any of the songs before, and they did a whole tour playing practically all of the Heartwork album. Nobody does that. So what is that? What am I getting at? Rehearsal, playing it live constantly. What did I say about Black Sabbath? They were on tour. Play the songs over and over and over, and then they go in the studio and they create absolute magic. It's my big thing about metal these days is our pre-production, our demos are our albums now. Everything click to it, click track, blah, 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 guitars left and right and the rest. That should be your demo. You should be demoing your stuff with the quantized, snap to a grid and the rest of it. Then you need to get in a goddamn room with your band and play it. Then you need to tour it. You need to play live. You need to really get the song, obsessed with the songs, and know them inside out before you record them. You know what I mean? So I think that's what's missing in metal. It's not just that. There's more facets to this, and it's called being obsessed. Now, I mentioned the demo, right? That they demoed the Carcass, the Heartwork album, and it caused a lot of issues because when they initially went in to record, they tried out dual rectifiers, 5150, various Marshalls, all sorts of stuff, and it just wasn't happening. They still could not get the energy and vibe from that demo. And it caused a lot of problems. And they had 2 SM57s right on the grill cloth of the speaker. The speaker, people think it's a vintage 30. It wasn't a vintage 30. It was a G12t-75 Celestion speaker. The 75s. The scourge of the forums back in, 10 years ago. If you told people that you use a 75 like I was, they would laugh at you off the forum. That doesn't have as much mids as a V30. So it was an SM57, but one was direct center, and as close as they could get it. And on a different speaker in the same cab, they would go to the edge of the cone. So it gets a little bit meatier, gets a bit more muffled, but it also brings out the beef. When you go further across. When you get right in the middle, you get the definition, the pick attack, you get the straight beam of fucking treble, teeth rattling treble. But then if you blend the two, then, you know, it's similar to the Friedman technique, which is in vogue. So this is what the all the forum guys are waiting for. Basically, there's something that is referred to as the Franken Cabinet or Frankencab. What they did, because they weren't happy with the actual the studio guitars versus the demo guitars, so they tried to finesse everything. They tried different pickup heights, swapping things out. You know, it wasn't working. So what they did, so you have two cabinets, okay, two 4x12 cabinets. They took the back off both of them, so they were open backed, okay. They took the speakers out of this one. They put corrugated cardboard, heavy duty cardboard, over the holes that were on this one and put them back to back. So all it did was really, you've got a 4x12 cabinet that is twice as long as, and I think they used like gaffatape to seal everything up. So it was, you know, a bigger cabinet is all it is, you know, twice as big, twice as wide, and that type of thing. So that is what they did. These are the lengths they were going at, and the punchline is Bill Steele still wasn't happy with it. So nothing was working until they went. The demo was done in a cheap room on an Allen and Heath console, I think it was. I think the main expensive room in the studio was done on a Neve VR console. So they thought, okay, we're gonna have to recreate the demo sound. We're just going to have to use the same console that they used on the demo. And so they took this huge cabinet and they had to take it into a different part of the studio where this other cheaper Allen and Heath console was. And so they set it all up. They mic'd it up with the mic on, you know, one direct center in the cone, the other to the side of the cone with SM57s on a different speaker on the same cab. Boom, there it was. So your fancy Neve console, which usually is something that I haven't heard that good thing about Neve VR versus the old, you know, 1073s. So it was this old Allen and Heath console that brought out the crispy high end of the demo tracks that was satisfying. So that was it. But I also have I'm just gonna speculate here. I don't think it was a case of, it might have been them just, they bashed on the guitars for so long. I think the whole album took about a month to do. And most of that was getting the guitar sound. And I think when you obsess about guitar sound for that long, you end up with something amazing. You know, I don't think it was specifically the combination that they ended up with that was so magical. I just think it was them obsessing about every aspect, the pickup height, the custom cabinets, and it all came together slowly, and then finally you have a groundbreaking album sound, you know. And it's not just the guitars, it's the drums. They in Parr Studios they have a room, and off these rooms you have different rooms with things like one, I think it's like has slate walls or something similar that will create echo. Another one has a mellower room, wood tile, you know, tiles, things like that. So they had different types of rooms for different sounds. So what they would do, they would have the drummer who would use leg weights to get, I think because when you go fast, you know, you can lose a bit of punch. So if you have leg weights on as well, it kind of helps you on your downstroke. It might just be for also conditioning of his legs or whatever, but I think a lot of it is to do with the tone and the knock that you get. They were, back then the typewriter sound was kind of in, but so to get away from just click, you know, you want a bit of boom on there as well. So, but they also they would open up doors to these chambers for ambience. So that you wouldn't just have the drum sound, you'd have also a bit of ambience mics picking up from these other rooms as well. So it's like every single aspect of this album was covered. That isn't done these days. I mean, people like Andy Sneap have complained in the past about bands coming in half-assed, not even having songs written, and you've got to do it then and there. It's like Carcass toured with this album before the album was out. They demoed the album before, you know. It's like this is what you need to take. Don't think that you and your easy drummer is the end of it, is the end of your song. That should be the start of it. That should be what you give to other musicians and say, let's practice the bejesus out of this. And then we'll go and obsess about every aspect of the sound. I don't know, the biggest issue with this is I don't know what the bass, anything about the bass sound on this album. And Colin Richardson, I think he was, correct me if I'm wrong, a Sansamp guy when it came to bass quite often. I think that was one aspect of it. I'm sure he had amps and the rest of it. But if anyone knows what was used on the bass sound, I'd really appreciate that in the comments. And before you go running out to buy an Allen and Heath mixer, it was modded. This engineer was a maniac. And it's kind of a weird situation. His dad, while the album's being recorded, was dying of cancer. So imagine dealing with nothing but putrefaction and death, and and then you're with this band who are obsessed with the subject, and even if it's from more of a shock value, because they're vegans. They're not, they're about the nicest people that you can meet, Carcass are, but it's just for shock, it's just to the early trolling, you know what I mean? So it's their albums. I remember holding the early Carcass albums as a teenager and thinking, I'm going to get in trouble if my mother finds this. There's nothing but dead bodies on the cover, real dead bodies. And the main amp was a 5150. They also blended in a 30th anniversary Marshall, which is basically a JCM 900 with 3 channels. And also they had a practice amp as well, a Marshall practice amp like Valvestate. So they mixed it in, and that apparently, legend has it that the top end was from this little practice amp. But you can never, just because it was set up, it doesn't mean it made it to mix, because that's what I want to say. I say if you line all these things up, it's not necessarily going to come in exact, because who knows what ended up in the final mix. It might have been all 5150. So what I did, I used a 5150 copy, a Bugera. I used a JCM 800 to get the JCM 900 tone. Very similar amps. The JCM 900 is a little bit more squirrely in the upper mids, a little bit more harsh, as they say. So I harshed up I got my JCM 800 to sound a little bit more plasticky, a bit harsher. And also I used a Valvestate on the old Chuck Death Valvestate as my solid state one, and I really ramped up the fizz on that as well, which is very easy to do on that amp. I mean, a lot of people talk about the Valvestates and the Randalls and things like that, and they think they're good. They're not good. They sound like ass. It's just that when you have a fucking genius like Chuck, or you have a genius like Dimebag playing through it, it's going to sound bloody good no matter what, So like I say, it was mixed on I think it was an SSL console was the mix. So, and also they had like Massenberg EQs, unobtainium shit. So if you think that you can get the Carcass sound, you can't. It's what it is. It's obsession. It's craft. I mean, Bill Steer even refused to sing on that album, and the rest of the band was like, "Dude, you got to sing, because it's part of the, the whole cake." But he was like, "No, I want to concentrate on my guitar only. I'm going to obsess about this." And he went in one direction. And I've said that before. I said, if you can find somebody as obsessed, like most of us are obsessed with guitars if you watch this channel. But what you have to do is try and find somebody obsessed with bass, find somebody obsessed with drums on the same level. And that's when you create something that good, when it's that rehearsed, when you obsess over it, and when you won't take, just because you're in a fancy, the Coldplay studio, which has had so many hits, and just because you're in there with Colin Richardson doesn't mean you have to not make your voice heard. They almost got rid of Colin Richardson during the performance, during the recording, because Carcass were like ride or die. They found out that Colin was working with some other death metal bands on the side, and they were like, no, you have to be committed to us, and because this is it's like a ride or die thing, so it's just because you're in a nice studio, just because the producer is, if you're not happy with the guitar sound, don't just say okay. You got to fight for it. And so that is my takeaway. It's not the Frankencab, it's not the solid state Marshall, it's not the fucking microphones, it's the obsession, and it's the realize that the best bands in the world all played thousands of gigs, rehearsed so often with real people. They weren't there with Easy Drummer. They weren't there with, on their own producing music, DIYing it. I mean, you can see the death of the Guitar Hero has gone hand in hand with the introduction of the the prosumer market. If you see people, you can probably picture on a graph of Guitar Hero, you got Nirvana, and you have Pantera, and then you have a fucking, after nu metal, there's a cliff. Because when nu metal died out, that is when the digital door started coming into people's households. And that's when everybody got obsessed with the click track and the fake drums and the drum replacement, and everything's on rails. And now nobody likes our music apart from musicians. So this is what I want to say. Live and rehearsals is key. It's not a fucking Frankencab. So that's it. I mean, we have to realize that we're in a bubble when it comes to being a musician online in the little community. People think I'm a YouTuber. I have 20,000 subs. It's nothing. We're dying out. I'm lucky if I get a comment a day sometimes. So we think that it's all happening because you subscribe to me and you subscribe to a couple of other guitar guys, but we need to take it back. And that the key to it is real music, because you cannot, with a Kemper, you cannot camper the magic that is a real band playing live in a room. Okay? It's chaos theory. When you mic up something like AC/DC, you can hear the bass drum bleeding into, say, a guitar mic. You can hear bleed from other instruments. You're not going to get that with a Kemper. You're not going to get the subtle woof and bloom of the room farting out, that you can barely hear, but when you take it away, it just takes that little 5% out of it. So we need to recognize that we are in trouble. And people, if you look at music festivals, the huge music festivals, they're all propped up by people older than me. We have people quitting like Slayer. It's what young bands are bringing in 100,000 people to their gigs, And as it happens, the popular bands are the ones who do it the old way. I'm not saying they're great, but I've covered Greta Van Fleet, copycat aspect of it. But people like them because they can play and they're obviously rehearsed and they do it the old way. You can tell it's not Easy Drummer. So people crave that, and we're ignoring it because we're always right? I wasted 20 years doing the DIY thing. I wish I had just found somebody as obsessed with this type of stuff as I was, and just rehearsed with them and toured and played, and then just it's more fun, right, than sitting in a studio on your own. So like I say, this album on its own, amazing, but because of the internet and the copycat guys and the 5150 infamy from this album, largely, it spawned so many copycats, and it created Melodeath, which got pretty, everything was perfect, and then metal's just started going downhill from copycats. I mean, what out there was like Napalm Death and Carcass and Bolt Thrower, and they were in the same genre, but they sounded completely different, So you need to take that. You need to, it's ironic because I recreate, famous albums, but I do that to borrow a little bit here and a little bit there, So I do the Brian May thing where Brian May copied people's rigs, but then he had his own guitar, and that kind of brought his style out. So that's it. I hope this stuff helps. Don't get too obsessed about copying band styles, and just because most producers now are in the box doesn't mean that you have to be in the box. And just let's get metal off rails, and then we can see who the good drummers are. All right, chaps, like I say, please subscribe, please like, please share. You're not going to, because people my age don't. That's why we have shitty stuff being shared on YouTube, and it's more popular, and then people complain about it, but you don't do anything, you don't share and like and all the rest of it. So please, do me a solid. Let's do this. All right, and the next one is going to be My Dying Bride. So that's coming up soon. Hope you like it. Circle of Town.